Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Real Talk, where we interview people who have and continue to overcome adversity. Today, I have the pleasure of having Mr. Imran Haider on the call to discuss his journey in being a first-generation child of immigrants from Pakistan that has found a way to build an impactful life as a professor, small business advisor, and community advocate. I am honored to introduce you to my friend and coworker, Imran Haider. Imran, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Excellent, man. Thankful to be here. Thanks for having me. Seriously, I'm humbled to be here.
Yeah, I am too, by the way. I'm humbled to be in your presence. It's been great to get to know you over the years. Can you take us back and kind of fill in for our listeners, like where your origin story starts at?
Yeah. I think people, you can start anywhere with your story when you prompt like that, but first generation Pakistani American, born and raised in the Portland area and specifically in Oregon City, Oregon. I think that identifies what a lot of the origin, because there's at that time when I grew up in Oregon City, it was, I think, less than 1% of the demographic was Asian in that city. And so, it was a unique experience for me. So my story is growing up there. I'm the middle child. I have an older brother, younger sister. Both my parents, my dad went to school in California and then he got a job offer in Oregon. That's what brought him to Oregon. And, so my parents were just a rare type of person that wanted to live in a place that was a kind of rural and not as, I would say, diverse as some of the other areas in the Portland area that were perhaps not super diverse, but more,
Yeah.
So my story was just today, as we speak about it, it's about me being a person that was constantly reminded that I was different and asked questions about my name and made fun of for my name and given information about my identity constantly fed to me by people, which they thought, they were telling me what was right and wrong. And so, growing up there. And then after that, I went, after I graduated high school, I went to Portland State and then I finished my degree there. And then I worked for a year in sports journalism. Then I went back to Portland State to get my master's degree. Then I finished graduate school there. And then the fast forward is, where we are in the last 10 years ish, 10, 12 years is college teaching and working in the private sector a little bit. So, and then along that path, I played sports growing up a lot. And I was always engaged and passionate and energized to get out of bed to play basketball every day. And I was pretty much the shortest kid in class most of my younger years. So it was tough. It was tough. You were?
No.
I was gonna say, then one day you turn 17 and all of a sudden you're 6'7". So that's cool. For me, I turned 17 and I was 5'10" instead of being 5'5". So so that's a little bit of a synopsis from my background. I don't know if obviously I gave you the brief summary and there's a lot more details there.
What do you wish more people knew about what it was like growing up, the way you grew up? As you mentioned, constantly being reminded how different you were. If they could sit in your shoes, what would you want them to know?
It's an excellent question. I think now I'm finally at the point, I would say in the last 3 to 5 years of my life, being a fully grown adult where I'm comfortable in my identity to talk about this stuff. And what I wish more people knew was that it is different growing up with your name being different than what the norm is here, your religion being different than the norm, your skin color and your appearance being different than what people see in Oregon. It's like 85-87% Caucasian. So you're just in a small percentage of people that possibly look and sound different. My parents are both non-native English speakers and have heavy accents. And so what I wish more people knew is that there is actually a challenge to being different. I mean, it exists in school and it exists in professional life and it exists in your social life. And what happens is you're just, even when I used to get nervous, like meeting new people, and people think I'm this extrovert, but I'm secretly really an introvert. And a lot of it was just going into a room with people I was kind of scared to tell him my name because I knew I was going to have to repeat it several times. I knew I was going to have to spell it. And then I knew the next string of questions would be, where are you from? And then the next question would be, when did your parents come here? You know, and I would have to answer the string of questions and secretly, with fingers crossed behind my back, hope that they would accept my answer as being credible or fitting in or whatever check mark that I wanted them to give metaphorically, you know? So yeah, it was just constantly that it's being asked the question, where are you from, having to prove yourself in life, in society, as a human, as a professional, as a friend, as a person. Just being able to fit in was a hard thing, or wanting to fit in was the really desired thing, just to be one of the people in your social circle in high school, or one of the, just like any manager or supervisor at a company. People don't realize that you don't necessarily have the same ability to lead sometimes when you're not of the majority. So when you're a minority leading, there's different resistance to what you want to, how you want to lead people, and possibly more people can question you. And so those types of things are what the average person may not know about, perhaps what it's like to walk a day in the shoes of somebody who's living in a society that is, that they're very much in a small percentage of the population.
I don't know that even I can relate to that, right? Because, you know, I get asked questions like, where does your name come from? And obviously I know where that comes from.
Yeah.
But I think that your experience is on a much different level, right? Because for the most part, I kind of think most of us would know.
Yeah.
Right. How I got here,
Yeah.
how my family got here. Right. But
yeah.
Like I can't say that I really understand, right? Like what it's like to be in your shoes.
Yeah. And I can't understand what it's like to be in other people's shoes, to be female, to be of a different sexual orientation, to be Black, to be a lot of different ethnicities and physical appearances, that we all come in all shapes and sizes. I'm not saying that I have it harder than anyone else necessarily.
Yeah.
Just trying to paint a picture of, and you asked, how has that shaped me? It's really shaped me to be, and this is just, again, just me walking my own path, was I always felt like I had to try hard or harder, set an example, take the high road. If you don't take the high road and you don't set an example, then it's much easier for people to judge your entire background of your religion or your ethnicity or your appearance. And people like, oh man, this dude that, you know, he's brown, he's a minority, and, you know, he didn't give back to the community. Again, just from looking at it from a lens from when you're on a really small percentage, looking at the bigger society population, the majority, it's just, I always just felt like I needed to work extra hard to prove that I belonged, you know, really get good grades and not ask for a free pass anywhere, always earn everything. And like I said, those little things, hold the door open for people, and be a kind person, be a giving person. And hopefully that feeds into eventually like how people look at you, which is more than just being put in this category of trying to fight uphill to fit in. And it's really like, wow, this guy is solid and he has a great reputation. He treats people right. And I never knew anybody who was brown skinned or named Imran or from Pakistan, but now that I do, I know that those are good people, you know, because people just don't have that idea or that understanding formed yet, and that file in their head that that's a way to look at somebody like that. Whereas usually if you're different, they may get the idea of who you are from a TV show or a movie, because characters are portrayed, you know, just like African Americans in the media can be portrayed a certain way very regularly. So are Southeast Asian, Pakistani, Middle Eastern people are portrayed in a bucket that's unique, and it's typically not positive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a lot of people who would come and have dialogue with me just at any point in my, even college, when 9/11 happened, people are like, why'd your people do this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that shaped me, because I was like,
Yeah.
man, I guess I need to prove that those aren't my people. You know,
Yeah.
I'm a
Right.
nice guy. I never
Yeah.
would think of that's unthinkable to me. I'm just like you on your side. I don't
Mm-hmm.
understand, can't
Yeah.
relate to somebody who would do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that you're looked at is oftentimes brought up by like a news article or
Mm-hmm.
a bigger thing that happened on the other side of the world, but somehow they relate
Yeah.
it to you because your name sounds like theirs or something, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So
Mm-hmm.
it all shaped
Mm-hmm.
me in a way that was, I felt like I had to really, really emphasize the being great, being good, being
Mm-hmm.
giving, and always lived at my adult years later on. I read a book and I always lived by the motto, um, greet the stranger, feed your neighbor. And that was just always my approach
Mm-hmm.
to what the way I wanted to live life. And hopefully that has helped in
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
situations, or helped
Mm-hmm.
me to have that certain approach on life in general.
Yeah. I can relate to that. I remember meeting with people in different like parts of neighborhoods or just parts of Oregon where, there may not be, many people that look like me in that neighborhood. And so I've sat at some kitchen tables and had people look at me like they were looking at a ghost in a lot of ways, like, holy moly, like this guy's actually pretty nice. And you know what I mean? And
Yes.
it's like the news is one thing, right? But what
Mm-hmm.
people are actually like in person, if you give it a chance, right, you'll learn that, we're we're all the same, right?
Yep. And I'm just giving it to you straight how
Yeah.
I have experienced it, because
Yeah.
that's obviously the point of this conversation today.
Yeah.
Is it's supposed to be as real as possible, like it's
Yep.
uncensored, it's unedited,
Yep.
and it may not be what people want to hear, but a lot of times, like when you are given the vibe or the impression or that this weird feeling in the room of like I don't like you, people just look at, or they don't make eye contact with you,
Mm-hmm.
but they just look at, and you feel like, man, like I really need to do my best to fit in this room. And I know you relate to me on that, Keith, because it's
Mm-hmm.
like maybe people have only ever seen a handful of
Mm-hmm.
tall black people, you know.
Yeah,
And
sure.
they're just like, I don't know what to expect, I don't know who this person is or how they're going to act. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I went through.
Yeah.
And so it was always, it was constantly just a battle with trying to set the best example
Mm-hmm.
for somebody who looks like me or somebody who's different.
What was it like getting started as, like, when did you start playing basketball?
I started playing in the first grade, and those are great memories because it was just something that was, this obviously. And I think this is what some people don't maybe hear a lot, but basketball is like, it's kind of an escape, but it can be an escape in a way that's like, when you get into a game or on a basketball court, it doesn't matter your name, and it doesn't matter if you have money, it doesn't matter sexual orientation, it doesn't matter your religion. It just doesn't matter anymore. It's just about playing, and all that, what kind of shoes or clothes you wore to school is irrelevant at that point to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So it was really cool to have this thing that I really, it was in my DNA. Like I just enjoyed it. I wanted to be around it more. I always every day. My dad installed a basketball hoop in our driveway. Like, I don't know, I must have been early grade school years, and I would just play for hours. I'd go out, I'd come home from school and eat dinner, and I'd just be out there for hours playing just by myself or with my brother. So I started early in grade school, and it was just something that always was appealing. There was never, I can never think of a day in my mind where I didn't want to go play with friends or practice by myself or go to basketball practice when I was a part of teams,
Yeah.
And it's weird to think about something like that in life, where you can't associate anything, where you were just like, I don't want to go, I don't want to do it. Like, that was the one thing, because there's obviously always days where like, don't want to go to school, don't want to take the test, there's things like that, or places you have to go with your parents or whatever, and you're like, oh man, I don't want to go, that was just never ever associated with that.
Yeah.
So that's why I have such good memories of when I started playing, and how it impacted me is immediately in a positive way.
Yeah. Do you feel like, maybe for the first time, and maybe this podcast was supposed to happen today, because here we are on MLK Day. It wasn't something that was, planned at all.
Yep.
But here we are talking a little bit about some of the differences we have, culturally and racially and things like that. But do you feel like maybe for the first time you had something in common, or like what was it like from a like acceptance or social perspective being Pakistani and joining the basketball team?
That is, yeah, that's really deep insight, but it's accurate because you're right. Like at that point, it was this feeling probably that now that analyzing it, looking back at it, where I didn't feel a vast difference, or I didn't feel like I was in the out group, when playing. And although I was small, I was just one of the shorter kids. I was always good, and it helped to be it helped to be good because you were picked first, or you were the captain, or you know how it goes at recess.
Yeah. No, I actually don't know, but yeah.
Oh man, but that's where it was good. It felt really good to be thought of in a high regard at doing something, and I actually loved that. So matched up where people thought of me highly doing it, and then I also loved it as well, and I just found success in that. And in my early years, in grade school, definitely, and then in middle school some. And so those were definitely, I think, significant positive impacts for me. Just being a part of a system meaning the sport of basketball, that didn't have any type of drawback or negative impact on what day-to-day life was like, in comparison.
And you were able to play for a while, right? And I want to learn more about kind of your journey, like through that. But what does, now that I mentioned it, like what does the journey of Martin Luther King mean to you? Being someone as a professional, an entrepreneur, a professor, someone that obviously is a leader in the local community.
I think what he did, and there's all these famous quotes about him. The thing I respect most about MLK, and it's interesting, it's like it was really about the content of his character. It was that he was driven by making change with nonviolent means. That's the best way I can sum it up. And that's the way that I've tried to, in my adult years, I think that's the most relatable comparison to the way I try to make a difference in life is in the college classroom. I try to help people get somewhere, and also challenge them to think a different way, which MLK obviously did. And so I think a lot of us, in our own small way, whether it's however much the needle moved in your own little capsule that you have, it may be just grains of sand compared to what MLK did, but it motivates me to read about him because he was such a powerful individual, just based on how he was able to create dialogue and engage people and challenge people to think a different way. And we still are doing that today, which is so cool. And that's where I truly feel like with DEI work, or with college teaching, or with even just playing or mentoring or coaching sports, it's constantly, we're trying to carry on the torch of what he kind of taught people, which was, you don't have to fight about it. You don't have to hate people. You can just, we can not agree with people, but still get along with them and find something in common with them, but coexist in a society with them. And because I think at the end of the day, everybody has really the same goals in life. It's just, we have a different way, maybe different techniques of how to get there. But then that's where the dialogue comes in. Kind of share what you like, what they like, and hopefully you learn something from them. And by the end of the day, you get somewhere. By tomorrow, you wake up and like, man, I understand a little more how this person thinks over here, and how it's cool to have them in my society instead of how I don't want them here anymore. But we could talk about, obviously we could talk about that for hours, because but that's really fun to think about, just on this day that we celebrate. It's a national holiday, how it's in some way impacted our lives.
I remember and I'll share this story, and I want to learn more about your journey
Mm-hmm.
through high school. But recently, I was in Texas, and I saw some things happen, and I thought it was kind of odd because maybe it was probably the first time that I was able to maybe step a little bit outside of my own shoes and see kind of the dynamics of a room.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, I grew up on a more diverse side of town up until the
Yep.
time I was in like first grade, and then we went to the other side of town where it was less diverse, from the first grade to the fourth grade going into my fifth. Then I
Mm-hmm.
went back to the other side of town. And so I've always, because I think I've been able to navigate life a little differently, maybe even being privileged to a certain extent as an
Mm-hmm.
athlete, getting a scholarship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
I was able to find opportunity outside of the neighborhood. But
Mm-hmm.
I had witnessed some things, and I had to speak up about it because essentially there was what appeared to be somewhat of an altercation
Mm-hmm.
between two different, races of people.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, I would say that I haven't paid enough attention. I haven't paid attention really to like cultural differences and how they
Yep.
show up in like racism, things like that. Just because I think, my mom and my dad and my grandparents never really talked much about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember being a kid and going to Texas actually
Yep.
for a family reunion and learning for the first time that I had relatives that weren't of African American descent.
Wow.
Right. That became a powerful narrative for me just because I could understand what we came through.
Yep.
So there was a certain strength that came to that, but
Yep.
not the other side of it. Like when I think about when people ask about where's your name come from and all those things, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I mean, it came from slavery, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's where it came from. But
Yep.
um, I don't know why I wanted to share that other than like I've learned and had to learn even as a African American man, like the different dynamics and the different experiences that we're all experiencing, even if we are of the same culture, right?
Yeah. I think it's great that you share that because it just ties into what we were saying. I mean, it's the way I look at it too. I was at times I would not say anything in my earlier
Mhm.
years. I just didn't have confidence. I was way
Yeah,
too insecure. And
yeah,
it relates back to what I just talked about a few minutes ago about growing up. I was growing into this identity which was insecure, unsure, I
mm,
was trying to fit in. I was just like, I'm lucky to be here.
mhm,
That's just what I thought
mhm.
a lot. I
Yeah,
was like, I'm
yeah,
lucky to be here around these
mhm,
people who own this country
mhm,
and they allowed me to be here. Like
yeah,
that was no joke. That's my mentality for years.
mhm, mhm,
Was I'm so happy that people allow me to be here.
mhm,
And then in my later years, I want to vocally advocate for what you're saying, people who are not treated properly or
mhm,
fairly, and also just that kid that's going to go through a system of in a school system, whatever it is,
mhm,
that could possibly have a better experience with somebody advocating on his or their behalf on whether it's their ethnicity or their religious beliefs or whatever it
yeah,
is,
mhm,
to create better competency and understanding for hopefully a community that can wrap their arms around like diversity or differences or being more inclusive. My insecurities have faded over time where, yeah, I'm with you. Like when you saw that altercation in
mhm,
Texas, you reached a point finally where like, hey man, like I know this stuff happens now and like there's
mhm.
history behind it. And
Yeah,
and with my stature and my voice and my competency and my education and my life experience, I can do something to help this
mhm,
person
yeah,
or educate or improve society. And if you can, why not?
mhm,
That's the way I look at it. So I think the story you told, I relate to it very well, just maybe in a way that ties back into overall goals in life and how we want to impact people with
mhm.
advocating, educating, etc.
Yeah. So tell us about you went on from high school,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you played in high school, and then you became a coach, and that's where we met, right? Can you
Mm-hmm.
talk? Can you
Yep.
tell us a little bit about like what was that like?
Well, in high school, I played for a year and then I got
Mhm.
cut my sophomore year.
Okay.
And so I actually went back out for the team my junior year and it still didn't work out. And I got
Mm,
cut from varsity. And then my senior year, there was a new coach and I had really very little shot of making the team. The coach all but told me that I wasn't going to make the team.
mm,
So that at that time, I wasn't really in a position to play high school ball. So I only played 1 year, but I think that right there shaped me a lot as well, because that just created a more intense work ethic. I think I just wanted to get up and win. I just wanted to be better and try to put myself in positions to succeed and not get cut from anything ever again. I don't want to get cut ever again. I want to get fired. I don't want to get cut. I don't want to be released from a position that I feel like I should have, like nothing like that. So learning about how it felt to go through that, I played and I trained and I got better. I felt like I was getting better. And in college, I improved drastically from high school and just understood at a higher level. And I ended up walking on the tennis team my freshman year in college. And it was great because my coach was like, you have potential, you could be good. I was just never passionate about tennis. I was pretty good at it, but never passionate. My coach knew that I loved basketball. And so I don't know, 4 months into my freshman year, I was playing basketball. And I broke my left wrist and I showed up to practice and she was like, what happened? And she's like, okay, so from now on, you're not going to go play pickup at random places because you can get hurt and whatever. And she's like, you're going to play in a controlled environment. I was like, what do you mean? I have to play,
Yeah.
And I'm talking about basketball, not tennis. And so she was cool where she was like, we're going to get you up. We're going to try to make a situation for you here at Portland State so you can play basketball and tennis and stay healthy. And as a part of the women's basketball team's conditioning, they would play the men's tennis team is what she set up and scrimmage them. So that was what her idea was. And the women's basketball coaches all just like immediately vibed with me and connected with me and they loved me and they would talk to me after practice and they knew that I played a lot and they saw me talking to the players and just helping them do stuff and want to get better. And it wasn't about anything other than that. I was just enjoying it because it was a cool, unique environment. And they ended up asking me after my freshman year in college, they asked me my sophomore year or maybe into my junior, I might be getting them mixed up, but they asked me to kind of be a student assistant for the women's basketball team. So that's how I got into learning about Division I coaching and scouting. And I ran the scout team basically so every week the opponent, and it was like in the Big Sky, like Montana State, Weber State, whatever opponent they were playing, I would watch film and then I would prep the men's scout team to play against the women's team with the defense and offense and the plays that they were running that week. And it was a really cool, unique experience. It was great that the coaches gave me confidence and they just believed in me to do that important stuff. And so that's where I learned about coaching. And then from there I got to know the men's players, like, your teammates and I was always in the gym shooting and stuff. And they invited me to play open gyms in the spring and stuff. Sometimes and running with you guys, which was really cool. So that's kind of the way that I got into coaching, was just going that route from having played and then ended up walking on the tennis team and then ended up leaving the tennis team to go be a student assistant for the women's team. And that was just awesome because I did that till my senior year. Great experience.
Yeah, I love it. And then you played after that too, right?
I played. Yeah. So at that time I was still just, 150, 160 pounds, 5'11". Like, I was quick and I could jump, but I was getting pushed around,
Yeah.
So I was like, at that time I was like, man, I don't know if I can even play D1 or do anything or walk on. So I was like, what am I going to do? So after college, I continued to train and I played all the time in every league I could get my hands on, all the kinds of pickup. And I ended up getting a shot to go to a tryout. I got invited to a tryout with the IBL. It's an international basketball league. It's a semi-pro league and for the Portland Chinooks. And so I was just lucky to make that roster. I went in there and I played smart. That's also what I always tell people. I played smart at that tryout. There's probably like 40 guys at that tryout and I think 15 made the roster.
Yeah. Okay.
And, they just liked that I knew how to play point guard. I was passing first, not dribbling the air out of the ball. And I was actually trying to communicate with people on the floor. And I think that just came as a result of knowing from the coaching side how to play. And then also I've played my whole life. So I played 1 year in the IBL, which is cool. It was a great experience. To me personally, it was just a personal achievement that I was able to make that roster. I was just felt validated almost because I got cut from my high school team. That wasn't my high school team was not good. Let's just also put that out there. They were terrible. And it was just funny that I got cut from that team and then I ended up playing semi-pro, which was just a really cool personal goal of mine that I achieved. So yeah, so that was the highest level that I played at. And then I think I was lucky to be able to pick up and open runs with D1 guys like you and your teammates, and guys that played pro overseas and some NBA players and stuff. And that was cool to be able to do that into my, I'd say, early 30s to do that and play at a high level. Yeah. So
yeah, that's great. I mean, I think that, like obviously like only 4% of players play beyond high school, right? So you put yourself in rare air.
That statistic that you just gave me, and I'm a stat nerd, and I've never read that, but that makes me feel I'm gonna sleep a little better tonight.
Yeah.
Maybe. You're like,
Well, I mean, even when you think of it, like the percentage of players who play after college is even
smaller.
It's even smaller. So
well, let's not get into the IBL is cool,
but
it's not it's not like let's just be honest, we're here to be transparent. The IBL is cool. It's structured, it's organized, they try hard, and I was super thrilled about it. So but it's not anything like, I mean, I think playing D1 and playing in Europe and all those things are a different level than the IBL, obviously. But it is really cool, and that's really neat to have that perspective.
So you got done playing. What were you doing professionally at the time while you were playing?
I was in graduate school when I played in the IBL. That's at that time I was in graduate school, and I was just trying to finish my master's degree and see what was going to happen from there.
What'd you get your master's in again?
So I got my master's in, so it was through the communication studies program, but I was able to focus on media studies because at that time I had been a sports journalist in college and after, and I thought I was going to go into sports journalism again with a master's. So that's kind of what my focus was. Media studies.
Okay. Got it. And ultimately, what did you end up doing though?
So I mean, I ended up, I had one graduate professor. I had a lot of great graduate professors. They were awesome, but one in particular was super close to me, and she just helped mentor me, and she gave me ideas about what I could do when I finished the program and stuff. And I had no teaching experience I was a graduate TA for 2 or 3 courses, so I was able to like teach lessons and run couple of the classes and grade some papers when I was in graduate school for undergrad. And I thought it was cool, but I was never official like graduate teacher. It was paid for it or anything like that. So when I finished graduate school, she was like, you could totally do it. You'd be great. You have the personality for it. And I had never even entertained that idea to be a college professor, So so she ended up having to contact the community college, and they reached out and they were like, hey, we're looking for part-time professors, etc. And the timing just lined up where I think I'd been already done with the program for 6-ish months at that time. And so it just worked out. She made a call and they interviewed me, and I just got lucky. I don't know, luck, whatever it was, but the stars aligned where I got an interview, hit it off with the program director, and they loved me, and they were like, you don't have experience, but we're impressed with, just how I interviewed and stuff like that. And I think my graduate professor wrote me a great recommendation too. And so with that in mind, they gave me a shot. And so that was in 2009. I got to my first chance at being a college professor. And that's where it started, just from graduate school. That's the profession I didn't expect to go into, but I was glad I did, because then I fell in love with it, where I was super happy about it, passionate about it. I didn't know what it was like before that profession to wake up and want to go to work. Like I always thought that you wake up and you just go to work because you have to, and you don't like it, and then you come home. But I actually was excited to go to work every day. And so that's what changed everything for me. Is like I just thought, I was like, I'm not a rich man, but if I'm happy doing this all the time, it's going to be worth it, whatever I get paid, because it check marks a lot of boxes for me.
How have you been able to persevere through cultural adversity? Because I know that there's someone that's out there that's, maybe has experienced something, and maybe it has been traumatic, but and I probably place myself in this probably the reasons why I haven't focused on it as much is because I want to stay focused on the direction that I want to go in.
Yeah.
Right. But not everyone's able to do that. And it
Yeah.
appears that you've experienced a lot, but you've also
Mhm.
been able to persevere through it and create and become a great leader. So
Yeah.
how
I
have you
appreciate
been able
that.
to do that?
Well, it took years, I think, as an adult to, again, you're always, every day people work on insecurities, and
Mm-hmm.
life is about trying to figure out how we can diminish those and how we can focus on our strengths, and
Mm-hmm.
how we can, like you're saying, how you can get
Mm-hmm.
to a goal, or you're always wanting to get somewhere. But the way to do that, best way to do that is to create clarity,
Mm-hmm.
and getting through cultural adversity is an interesting way you put that, because it started when I was younger, and then in my adult years, it still kind of continued with
Mm-hmm.
just people always asking me my story, like, where are you from, and what's
Mm-hmm.
your, messing up your name, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
those things finally brought me to, I wanted to be in the college classroom to educate people
Mm-hmm.
more on those topics, and hopefully that would help improve competency in society for people that are different.
Mm-hmm.
But insecurity of being different in a minority and treated different was, I think, the biggest obstacle to overcome, to
Mm-hmm.
believe. And it's interesting I use that word because it's on your hat, and it's pretty
It's
much your
subliminal.
motto.
It's subliminal.
You have to believe that you fit in. You have to
Mm-hmm.
believe that you belong in society. You have to
Mm-hmm.
believe that you have value to this community.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to understand the concept of nobody's in charge of this country. I mean, it's a weird concept to throw out there, but again, this is a real podcast with a real talk conversation.
Mm-hmm.
There's nobody runs this. Nobody has the rights to make decisions over other people. Everybody, 336 million or however many people are in the United States, we're
Mm-hmm.
all immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom line. There's not, not one person just popped up
Mm-hmm.
out of the ground and was like, I'm here, it's mine.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody at some point swam, took a boat, flew, and then created
Mm-hmm.
communities here,
Mm-hmm.
generation to generation. So
Mm-hmm.
this country is a result of immigration.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to wrap my brain around the concept that not one person, whether they're whatever their skin color, whatever their name, whatever their religious belief, has more right to this land than another person. If we want to go that route, the Native Americans win, right? The Native Americans win because they were here first. So the idea for cultural adversity and significance is about people believing that no matter what your background or makeup or any category that you put yourself in, it doesn't matter. Every person belongs. You have to believe that, and every person contributes, and every person makes our community what it is. No matter what, no matter if you're a teacher, if you're a police officer, if you do yard work, if you're a salesperson, if you're in the medical field, like every single person has value and contribution. And until people can wrap their brains around that, it's really, really difficult, to overcome those obstacles. So that's what I had to come to terms with, to deal with having confidence and believing that I had a role here that mattered, that was significant, and I was always worth what everyone else is worth.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
How do we adopt the proper mindset of DEI? Right? Like, I'll be the first one to tell you that I don't understand it because I'm not in the corporate world, right? I'm a solopreneur. And I haven't been a part of the conversation as much because it's just, I wake up every day and I go do what I do. But with that being said, I think that some of it can feel political for people, and because it's seen through the lens of politics, it makes it difficult for people to truly embrace the conversation without feeling like they have to rewire or readopt however they plan on voting. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you recognize that or seen that, but I have personally felt that way.
Yeah, I feel that way. I think that's one of the reasons why I feel like it's important work, important dialogue, important material. How I try to separate the political from that conversation is, first of all, I feel like I'm really a middle human being.
Yeah.
Like I've always been able to, and I think it probably has a lot to do with my upbringing, but I've always been able to see the right and see the left and
Mhm.
relate to both sides and
Mhm.
not feel like I'm ever too far left or ever too far right, and just see that everybody has value, like I just talked about.
Yeah.
DEI work is, and this is the way I look at it. I'm not saying this is the way it is, matter of
Mhm.
factly. I'm just telling you
Yeah.
this is the way, my philosophy on it
Yeah.
is it's like DEI work should not ever want to take away from someone.
Mm.
Okay. So
Okay.
people already exist with success or wealth or abilities. That's not, it's not set up to take away from them.
Mhm.
It's set up, the way that I look at it, to help people who may not have access to all the cool stuff in society
Mhm.
because they have been marginalized, or because historical contexts or stories prevent them from being able to walk through doors, or doors
Yeah.
may not be open for them.
Yeah.
So it's trying to open doors for people that may not have a voice or ever had a voice historically to be able to walk through those doors.
Mhm. Yeah.
And statistics about females who are CEOs, just look at the stats. Let's just
Mhm.
look at the stats. It's
Yeah.
not, they're not good.
Yeah.
They could be a lot more. There's
Yeah.
females are brilliant. They have better graduation rates and better grade point averages overall than men do. And so it's about, how do we get more females to be CEOs?
Yeah. Right.
That's an example of DEI work. It's not taking away anyone else's role,
Mhm.
but really it's, how can we give a voice to more females having opportunities to get in leadership positions,
Yeah.
for example. And
Mhm.
that's really about not being Democrat or Republican.
Yeah.
It's about
Yeah.
being a fan of success for everybody and
Mhm.
wanting everybody to achieve great things.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you. It's gotten very political, and it's tough for people to discuss. And that's where we get back into DEI work. For me, is very personal, because I was spit on, I was called names,
Mhm.
I was called really horrible names
Mhm.
that people have never been called before.
Yeah.
And I was bullied, and I was told to go back to my country regularly.
Mhm.
And I was, I could tell a lot more stories
Yeah.
about the way I was treated. Reason it's personal to me is because I was a person who was always trying to get doors. I had to work really hard to open those doors,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
other people already had rights to those doors because of the way that
Mhm.
I was treated. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I never felt like I had confidence to do certain things,
Mhm.
and I never had a voice to, and come back to that person and say, you can't treat a person like that, or I am in my country, I was
Mhm.
born here. I
Mhm.
never had
Mhm.
that voice. I never even
Mhm.
was able to say that.
Mhm.
So DEI
Mhm.
work is about being inclusive and creating understanding for people, for belongingness and opportunity,
Mhm.
and figuring out how we can put more ramps in restaurants so that people who are wheelchair bound can get into the door of that restaurant. Again,
Yeah.
we're not taking
Yeah.
away the ability for people who can walk into that restaurant.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're putting a
Mhm.
wheelchair ramp in so that the next 5 customers that come in over the next week that are
Mhm.
on wheels can get in that door.
Yeah.
And so that's DEI work for me. Is That's
Mhm.
what inclusivity is. It's about
Mhm.
everybody who wants to shop at that store, go to that restaurant, should be able to physically, for example, be able to access it. And
Mhm.
so a
Mhm.
DEI committee is going to help that person in a wheelchair who may not have a loud voice, who may be
Mhm.
at a certain age of their point in their life or health, that they can't go out and talk to a government entity or be well spoken to get that ramp put in.
Mhm.
A DEI committee is going to help to do that.
Yeah. Right.
That's one of the goals, for example,
Yeah.
to help advocate for somebody that may not be able to do it
Yeah.
on their own.
I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing that and explaining what that looks like.
Trying
Speaking of,
not to trying
yeah.
not to take 5 hours to explain it is hard, man.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand. You speaking of restaurants, you
Yeah.
helped start a brewery in
Hmm.
2015.
Yep.
What challenges and outcomes came from that?
Yeah, it was a crazy project, just because I had been in college teaching at that time for 6 years already, and I
Mhm.
was already kind of set in my profession. But a childhood friend who is like a brother to me asked me to be a part of a cool opportunity,
Mhm.
and he trusted me to do an important job, do all
Mhm.
the hiring and the payroll and training and schedules and a lot of stuff that I had never done before. So I had to teach myself how to do those things, and it was just the the challenges that it posed were, how can I overcome some mountains that typically a lot of restaurants go out of business in the first year, typically typically a lot don't produce revenue, can't expand, they can barely hire, they can barely keep their staff, they have high turnover. There's a lot of different things that got brought to my attention. So those were things that I constantly, tirelessly worked on day and night to read about, to educate myself, to figure out ways of retention, to figure out how I could hire more effectively, to figure out how we can increase team camaraderie, to figure out how an oiled machine like a business works top to bottom. That's a multi-million-dollar business that has starts from zero, and our goal is to grow and keep growing. And along that way was just, again, it was very challenging to be in a position of leadership, because it's just hard. You have to earn respect, and you hope people respect you, but they didn't always. That childhood friend of mine he's about 6'3" and he's white, and when he walked into a room, he got a totally different set of attention and respect than I did. And it was crazy, man. Even he would give the same message to people, and there would be a different response or reaction than I gave the exact same message the day before. You know what I mean? So there were always these challenges for me as a person when I went through that 5-year process of, how can I be more effective as a leader? How can I get people to respect me? How can I become more credible? And really for me, and I've told you this, it was just, I had to be active in doing everything I asked them to do and more. So I just took pride in cleaning more toilets than anybody who worked there, and showing up before anyone else did, and being willing to scrape gum off the floor like anyone else would, So that's what it taught me, was that you can't, even if no matter what position you are in a company, in life, no matter what, you have to still, your work ethic, your behavior, your ability to relate to people comes back to, how are you going to place yourself in these situations? Are you going to come in and give people information and orders and not do it yourself? And that may work for some people. It didn't work for me. Or are you going to do it yourself, and you're going to earn your stripes and credibility along the way? So a lot of challenges, but I think it ended up making me a stronger person, because I learned more about structure of business, people, how to manage people, a lot of different angles that I had never experienced before being in college teaching for most of my professional career.
What were you thinking when you went to work the day after busting your Achilles and showing up to work to open your third location?
It's just, that's a story that it humbles me that you remind me of that story, because I didn't think anything of it, Keith. Like I was like, I just had surgery, a couple whatever days ago. I'm still on pain meds, but I have to go in here and show. And just like every other day, I had to go in there. If I'm going to tell people to do something or expect them to do something, I have to be there to do it myself. Or I have to also set an example that if I expect my staff to show up through trials and tribulations and challenges, I have to be able to do that too. So it was always about just the wiring that, and I think you and I have that in common, the wiring that you have, which is you always have to walk the walk and outwork people. And that's really what it was for me, is just, and you're right. Even before I had, so there was two parts of the example. The one you didn't see was I tore my Achilles on a Thursday night playing basketball. And then the next day I went to work. I had a walking boot. I had a walking boot, and I was scheduled for surgery, and I think 6 days after that or something, but I had a walking boot just from the emergency room. And I went to work the next day, and I was like not doing well. And so that was one day. And then the time you remember was when I had gotten out of surgery from repairing my Achilles, and I had to do the same thing. So I wanted to make sure that people understood that for the years that I'd preached, that we work hard, we're there for our teammates. If you want somebody to do something as well as you do it, you got to show them that you're going to do it yourself. That's kind of what I always tried to do in the way that I illustrated how we wanted to establish a reputation and a company culture. You
led by example.
Tried.
Right.
I wasn't always perfect. Absolutely not in any way, shape, or form perfect, but I can guarantee you without hesitation that I always made an effort.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what I can tell you. I didn't do it perfect, but I can guarantee I always made an effort.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think this kind of goes without asking the question, but how would you describe your approach to life?
Yeah, I always ask the question, what do people say about you when you're not in the room? That's
Mm-hmm.
always what it is. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's just how you treat people, whether you're gonna do a favor for them or do something without them asking, or do something back for somebody who did something for you, or give them something because it's a special occasion. Like, you have to do things that move the needle, that create different outcomes, and as far as being personal, people getting to know them, make an effort.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really, at the end of the day, all we have is how you treat people. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I thank my parents for that. I mean, they've just, from throughout my life, they just really, that was a big thing for them, was you always treat people with respect, and you always are humbled by what you have, and you're thankful for what you have. And my parents came from, a different part of the world, where
Mm-hmm.
totally
Mm-hmm.
different set of infrastructure. So my whole life I learned about, and I visited there many times, half a dozen times in my life. So, like, didn't have hot water, and, you know, working plumbing or electricity or anything like that. And so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think they had a unique perspective in life that showed me from an early age throughout my life that you should be thankful for everything from the ground up.
Yeah.
And so my philosophy and my approach on life is always going to be, you always have to have a tireless work ethic, and you always have to treat people, no matter who that person is, whether it's the person who's helping pump your gas, the person serving you at a restaurant, a friend, a significant other, whoever it is. You always have to make your best effort to treat them like they all matter and they're worth millions of dollars. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people, that's just what we get twisted in life, happens a lot, is like, oh, that person's makes millions of dollars, like, you need to be extra nice to them, extra polite, and
Mm-hmm.
be, and it's like, that should apply to everybody.
Yeah.
Like, really. So that's
Yeah.
kind of where my approach comes back to: every single person has value, should be respected, matters across the board. And feed your neighbor, greet the stranger is just, again, what I go off of. It just has to be that way. And that's a sort of that can be literal,
Mm-hmm.
but it can be also metaphorical, where it's like, it doesn't matter who the person is. If you want to talk to someone, it doesn't matter if they're rich or poor or what their background is. Greet them.
Yeah.
If you want to share food, share it with whoever. Hopefully you share it with people who are appreciative, who need it, but
Mm-hmm.
you share food. You don't get to pick and choose, like, I don't like what that person look like, they don't get it, but they do. Like, everybody should get, if you're going to share.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what that means in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I think that it's number one, it's the breakthrough mentality.
Yes.
Right. Number one, it's the breakthrough mentality. The breakthrough mentality is stops at nothing. But also, it's also the abundance mentality, that my candle lighting someone else's candle does not reduce the size of my own fire on my candle.
Yep.
Right. And so I respect it, and I've seen you live it out, from day one when we met, being the hardest working person in the gym, as a coach, and then seeing you show up to work with a boot on to open a restaurant. And I just personally identified with it because I remember when I was, being an athlete and trying to work hard, you can always see the people who are giving it their all and the ones that aren't. And you always brought it. So I really appreciate
that. Appreciate that.
Yeah. To this very day, you're still one of the hardest working people I know. So
that means a lot, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Totally respect it. Any parting words for our listeners in terms of what they should take from your story? I think you really encapsulated, like, just in terms of how they should treat people and things like that. Is there anything else that you want to add?
I just want everybody in life to try to focus on what we love together, what we have in common together. And it's been, I don't know, it's just been wildly advertised, and it's spread really, really fast and really, really heavy to pick at differences. And I just think, again, that this is just coming from the whole theme of this conversation, but we should just focus on what we all love about life together and how we have in common, whether your neighbor is whatever religion, political affiliation, sexual orientation, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
We should just focus on what we like and what's great about our neighbors,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what I can leave us with. And that's going to be my goal for 2022, is just to try to unite with what we have in common.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate you being on the show today. I'll make sure I add all your contact information to the show notes where people can follow you and pick up on the good vibes that you bring to the world and the sense of responsibility at the same time. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, brother. All right.
You got it. Take care.